Perfect. Okay, so the topic today is that we'll have some new feature in the Teams protection, sensitivity label inheritance in Teams meetings. There are two parts to our agenda today. First is we'll take a quick overview of the existing offerings that we have. And the second part would be going over the new offering that we want to share with you today. Starting with the existing offering. So today in the Microsoft Purview portal, you can create a sensitivity label. So this is one of the most important features that you could use to start protecting all the data in Teams. Today, there are mainly two steps to start with protection in your Teams meeting. First step, you can create and apply a meeting sensitivity label. So this means that your meeting invite will be encrypted, which requires the Microsoft E5 license. And secondly, if you would like to have more advanced Teams meetings and chat protections, like shown on the right screen here, for example, control who can bypass lobby, control who can present, etc., we have a numerous number of team meetings and chats protection to choose from, which requires both E5 and Teams Premium. So you can create and apply sensitivity label with all of these protections available today in market. And after the first step, the second step is publish this label to the user, similar to how we use sensitivity label for other workloads. So in order for the users to adopt the labels, you can choose to have a default label. What this means is that you can define to say, anytime when the users create a meeting, by default, I want to make them, for example, confidential employees only, for example, general, depending on your needs. The other way you can use the label is to make labeling mandatory in Teams meetings so that you can ensure that there's no security risk and all the meetings are labeled correspondingly. And lastly, you can also ask for justification if users ever want to downgrade a label from a higher priority to a lower priority, for example, from confidential to general. This way, you can ensure that there is less security risk and ensure that all the meetings are labeled correctly. I've also included a link here if you would like to learn more on existing label creation today for Teams. Once you have created and applied those Teams labels, end users can manually apply sensitivity label during scheduling. So as shown on the screen here on the left, this is what the UX looks like to apply sensitivity label in Outlook. Under the sensitivity button, you can choose from all the labels that admins have defined here. You can also apply sensitivity label in Teams UX. Similarly, under the sensitivity button, you can choose the labels available. With these labels, any label protected invite can restrict who have permissions to view, reply, forward, extract, invite content through encryption that you have defined. I've also included more information on encryption to the link here. And I also want to share more about what Teams Premium can bring you through label protection. So Teams Premium can unlock even more protection value here. For example, you can have in-meeting sensitivity indicator to show what is the meeting sensitivity in the UX. Secondly, if there's any label change, there will be alert shown to meeting participants and meeting organizers to show any sensitivity change. Lastly, as we briefly mentioned before, there are more advanced meeting options. For example, in the screenshot here, it shows the policy that you have put in prevents any users from copying any sensitive meeting chats. In this example, if there's any sensitive content with the Teams label applied, you cannot copy paste any content from the chat. And all these values you can get today just with Teams Premium license. And going on from what we have heard from your valuable feedback. So based on what we heard, we really want to hear your voice and input. And so far, we heard that number one, admins would like to extend protection coverage in Teams because there's a lot of dynamic data shared. For example, you can share chat as sensitive, you can share files as sensitive, and Teams meeting is such a dynamic environment that there's so much data shared, and we would like to extend the protection coverage. That's the first feedback that we have heard. The second feedback that we heard is that admins would like to connect with existing labels because some of the content, such as files, are already labeled today. Reusing known sensitivity and classification of the data will really help admins with their workflow. For example, if the data labeled as confidential is shared in Teams, the meeting perhaps should also be confidential. The last feedback we heard is that if there's a way to automate and make it easier to label, that would be great. So today, a lot of the labeling does rely on end user manual labeling, which is additional steps for users when creating a meeting. Automating the labeling process will be able to increase label coverage effectively. So based on what we have heard from you, I'm going to introduce a new offering, inheriting Teams meeting label from shared files. I'll explain what this means, and I will start with the first flow, which is recommending users to update label. Later, we'll go over the second UX, which is automatically applying label. Here, imagine you are the information protection admin for Contoso. You have arrived at the Microsoft Purview portal, and you are inside the information protection solution, going to the policy tab under publishing policies. So here you already have some meeting labels created, and you want to ensure that these labels are published to your users for them to use. So here under label policies, I click publish label. Now I'm able to choose what sensitivity label I would like to publish. So here, my goal is that I want to be able to publish labels so that any content shared in the Teams chat will be able to, the label will be inherited to the Teams meeting. Which means that when I publish my label, I have to first make sure the scope of this label includes both files and meetings. I want to pause here to show you the new delta that we have in the Purview admin flow. So here, this is the new setting, apply inheritance between Teams meeting and artifacts. This means that if this setting is enabled within this label, if the meeting is labeled, then any files with higher priority labels shared to the meeting will automatically replace the existing meeting label. You just need to do a simple click and check this box and pick an option from the dropdown. We'll start with recommending users apply label. And then you just need to review and finish your publishing policy. Now let's switch to the end user's perspective. Right now, the admins of Contoso have finished setting up and enabling this new setting of label inheritance for the Contoso tenant. As an end user, now I will try to create a new meeting. I started with a meeting with no label. Before the meeting, Project Newton, a participant now shared a label file in the meeting chat. Because the meeting started out with no label, but the file was labeled as confidential, now I receive, as a meeting organizer, I receive a notification recommending me to update the label of the meeting from none to confidential. As a meeting organizer, I can simply click update label, and the meeting will be updated with a new label. The second scenario I want to share is that during the meeting, if any user live shares an even more sensitive file, let's say a highly confidential file. So I click share, And then I start live sharing this PowerPoint, which is labeled as highly confidential. So now, because someone is live sharing a highly confidential file, the meeting organizer gets a new notification to say, hey, we recommend updating the meeting sensitivity label to highly confidential. The meeting organizer can simply click the update label button here, and all participants can get a notification to see that the meeting label is changed to highly confidential. And I also want to highlight that it's not just the name of the label that has changed. Any protection, for example, encryption, watermarking, recording control, all these protection will also come with the label update. So that was the flow for recommending users to update label. Now let's move on to the other setting, automatically applying label. So let's go back to the admin UX flow first. Inside the Purview portal, on the same screen, you can choose in the drop-down to automatically apply any labels. And I click Next to finish. So what this means for the end user is that, let's say you have a meeting, and similarly, someone has shared a confidential file inside a meeting chat. Instead of recommending the organizer to update the label, with this configuration, the label will be automatically updated to the new higher priority label. As shown here, meeting changed to confidential. So this is the UX flow that we have for our new offering. I want to pause here and thank you. And please try this feature out in your tenant and provide any valuable feedback. This feature is currently in public preview. And I'm going to also share some resources to learn more about the licensing requirement and sensitivity label in Teams in general. I also want to pause here for any questions.
Yeah, Team's been great with answering questions in the chat. We do have a few that were unanswered. The first one is, how does this work with Copilot?
I'm actually just typing the answer right now in the chat, but I can speak to that for sure. That's a great question. We are actively working on Copilot's inheritance of the meeting sensitivity and also the meeting artifact sensitivity too. So in the future, when if you are using Copilot during the meeting, let's say you open the meeting Copilot and you're chatting with the meeting Copilot, and someone shares a file that triggers the label inheritance and your meeting sensitivity bump up to a higher priority label, then you will going to see your Copilot, it will use to inherit the old sensitivity. Every Copilot's response will have the meeting old sensitivity up to the point where your sensitivity upgrades, and Copilot will start to have its response labeled by the new sensitivity. So that's the experience you will see for the Copilot use in the meeting. And post meeting, if you use Copilot on meeting artifacts, say recording and transcript, you go to recording transcript, you ask Copilot, hey, summarize this recording for me, because your meeting, let's say during the meeting someone shares a file and your meeting get bumped up to highly confidential, your meeting recording will at the end inherit that correct highly confidential label, because we do label inheritance for recording and transcript, which is also under development right now. We will make sure it inherits the label of the meeting at the time the meeting ends, right? So at the if your meeting ends with highly confidential, your recording and transcript is labeled as highly confidential. And if you use Copilot today, after the meeting, you go go say summarize the meeting for me, and the Copilot will go access the highly confidential recording and transcript, and then have that reflected on its response saying, oh, this meeting is highly confidential because I'm touching the highly confidential recording and transcript. So that's the good thing about making sure your meeting ends with the right sensitivity, right? Because your meeting artifacts, including recording transcripts, loop notes, so all of these are going to inherit the correct sensitivity. And of course, we're actively working on all of these. Hopefully we can have some good news to share at the end of the year. So great question on the Copilot.
Thank you so much. The next question we have is, does the sensitivity label applied also protect during screen sharing sessions?
That sounds like a question on, so I would like to get some clarification on what type of screen share you're referring to. So right now we're the only screen share that we support for share file inheritance is live share. So there are 3 type of different screen shares. Right now we don't support the whole screen, like sharing your entire screen type of screen share, and the window share. So these are some, we have some technical difficulty, like limitation with these 2 type of screen share that requires some more investigation on how to support them. But live share, if you in the share pane, you just directly under live share, you click on any PowerPoint or Excel file. So these are files that supports live share, so that we can support label inheritance, because we know exactly which file you're clicking on and their sensitivity. So those are the screen shares that we support today.
Awesome, thank you. The next question we have is, with Teams Premium, are there any restrictions available for screenshots on Teams chat?
Great question. Not for now. That's definitely on our roadmap. As you may know, we're supporting prevent copy paste of the screen of the meeting chat, which is also being extended right now to live caption and live transcript, AI recap note, and so in the future Copilot too. So yeah, screenshot is something that we are looking at. So first thing we'll be looking at for prevent screen capturing would be the in-meeting, like your in-meeting screen. But that is on your whole window of the where the meeting is happening. For meeting chat, for Teams chat, it will be something after that. It will be a longer journey, but definitely something that we want to do.
Great, thank you. The next question is, if in Outlook we are creating a Microsoft Teams meeting and we already share or attach a file in that invitation, is it possible to inherit the same label or recommend user to apply a label even before the invitation is sent?
I want to say that's possible because I know there's attachment to email inheritance today, but I believe this is not covering the attachment to invite inheritance today. But this is definitely something on the roadmap. I would say it's what we're definitely going to get our Outlook team partners to look into this. Unfortunately, this is not something we cover in the current feature that Yibing just talked about. In this feature, we're only looking at files that are shared in the meeting chat, like drag and dropped or uploaded in the meeting chat, or live shared during the meeting.
Okay, great. The next question we have is, can you still share the higher level document if the meeting sensitivity label isn't changed? Also, what about meetings arranged by a PA or someone not in the meeting?
Yes, you can still share the document without changing the label. Let's say it's not automatically applied, it's recommendation. You can definitely decline that recommendation and still get the file to share. What about meetings arranged by PA or someone not in the meeting? Yeah, so if your meeting organizer is not in the meeting, then that doesn't impact if your label is automatically applied, right? It will apply regardless of whether organizer is being there. But if this is label recommendation and your organizer isn't there to during the meeting, then of course nobody is going to see that in meeting notification, but the organizer can still see recommendation in their activity feed. So even if they miss the meeting, if they check their activity feed, they would see someone share something during the like in this meeting, and then a recommendation for them to bump up the meeting sensitivity. We don't have support for delegation today, even correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think today if this is a delegate schedule a meeting, I don't think they will be able to see that label recommendation. But delegation is something that's also Outlook team is working on, as far as I know. I don't know ETA, unfortunately, but we can check back and circle back on that. So yeah, hope that helps.
Awesome. Thank you. The next one we have is, what restrictions can be applied when we label a meeting?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think Yibing shared in probably one of her slides, where you can see all the protection settings you can apply, you can associate with a meeting label. That includes invite encryption. So that's the very similar encryption you do today with email labels, right? You can restrict who can access the invite, who can forward, who can reply, who have what type of permission. So that's what it can do to invite. What it can do for meeting is that for in-meeting experience is that it can control things like who can bypass lobby, who can record, who can present, end-to-end encryption, watermark of the meeting, which is a watermark that shows each viewers, as each viewer, you see your own email address as a watermark on the meeting screen. Print, copy, paste. So there are about 9 meeting options that are security related that you can control with sensitivity label. The good thing of using sensitivity label is once admin defines what I want to enforce for each label, then when an end user use these labels, they are not going to be able to override those values. So those values will be locked for them. No one can change those values. Well, they can change to a different label, but they cannot override those sensitivity, those protection settings. So yeah, so feel free to look into more details in our documentation too.
Great, thank you. The next question is, what kind of protections are in place, if any, for sharing the screen that might contain sensitive data, or recording or transcription that could be controlled or blocked with specific labels?
Yeah, so if your shared screen may have sensitive data, that could be something that it's a new feature that's still internal that we're testing today, called video sensitive content detection. So that is I believe going to be live sometime later this year, that we will detect if there's sensitive content on your shared screen. It doesn't need to be any Office file. It can also be a PDF, or you write something on the notebook. We will detect if there's sensitive like things like so let's say credit card number, right? And we will detect that, and we will send notification to the presenter and the organizer as the first step. So our roadmap for that feature, our vision would be that to trigger things like auto labeling. If we detect something that will trigger, that will you can say what label you want to bump that meeting to, but today, I believe the first step would be only to just notify. And in the future, we may do things like auto labeling or even blur that part of the screen. So we're definitely doing something around this screen share sensitive data detection, recording transcript block controlled by specific label. So yeah, we are working on label support for recording and transcription right now. And so that is going to be, I want to say, going to be live probably later this year, sometime later this year. But the full capability for that may come next year. So just hopefully we can share some good news around that too.
Great. The next question is, how does this work if you're recording and a label is updated that does not allow recording? Does the recording automatically stop? What happens to the recording up until the point the label was updated?
Oh yeah, great question. So we don't have label control do not record today, actually. So we have a meeting option called who can record. With that meeting option, it only takes effect when you set that before the meeting. So basically that meeting option itself doesn't change during the meeting. So let's say you go to meeting option today. Let's say during the meeting, you change the value for who can record. You would see no impact for the current recording session. It will continue to go on. But it will take effect for the next instance. So if you end this current meeting, you start it again, say next week, you would see that only that new, the new value would take effect. Like only, for example, organizer can record now. So that, because that meeting option is only it's like you have to set it before the meeting, because it gets activated when the meeting is start. So when the meeting starts, we look at the value, okay, who can record in this meeting? So that's the only point that we check on that meeting options value. So because of that, we don't really, to answer this question, we don't really cut off any recording today, but that will, it will take effect for the next instance of the meeting.
Great, thank you. The next one's a little long. Will it only be the organizer who will receive the label change pop-up notification? Here's the scenario. The organizer does not attend the meeting as they just organized it. If the policy is set to not automatically update the sensitivity label, is there an option to set it to auto as part of the meeting setup instance as the organizer?
Good question. So I would say that is not something you can do today, because so first, yes, it is always the organizer who will receive the label change notification, because today it's only the organizer who can change the label on the meeting. Whether you can set it to auto apply if you're not going to be there, I think that's actually a very interesting suggestion. I think that's something we can look into. Let's say I know I'm not going to be there for this meeting, but in case anyone share anything that will trigger a label recommendation, I wanted to auto apply. That's something we can, I think that's a great suggestion that I can take back to the team and see whether we have a way to do that. And the other thing is, if you guys think organizer would be, if it's worth to give this label change capability to more roles like co-organizer, that's something we can look into too, because I understand that today we are limiting the label application or label change capability only organizer. Sometimes organizer is always only going to be just one person, right? If you don't have that person, and if that person, say, left the company, but that meeting goes on, then it will have a lot of trouble, because there's not a second person that can control the sensitivity. So yeah, that's another direction that we can look at, but I like this suggestion.
Great. The next one is the transcript labeled according to the option we labeled?
Not yet, because transcript does not support label today. That's something we're actively working on. And when the transcript will have a label, not the transcript, it's actually the recording that will have a label, and the transcript will be honoring that label.
Great.
Yeah, I know we have a lot of questions, so I'm gonna try to answer some in the chat, and maybe we can go over the ones that haven't answered or have a lot of.
That sounds good. Yeah, maybe if you start from the most recently asked ones, and I'll keep going down my list.
Sounds good.
Cool. The next one is, what if a label has protections in place that I would not normally have access to the information, and I am invited to a meeting with that label? Can I join the meeting, or what if it gets bumped up to a label that I would not have access to?
Let me try to make sure I understand the question correctly. You're invited to a meeting, and that meeting later gets a sensitivity that you as a participant would not have access to. I think that's a fine scenario, because you're not the organizer. So if you're the organizer, we make sure we are not going to give you a meeting, give your meeting a label that you don't have access to. So we always check the files label, and it needs to be higher sensitivity than your meeting. It needs to be scoped to meeting. It needs to be published to the meeting organizer. So it will be a well-defined label for your meeting for sure. When you're a participant, I would think that's even more okay, because the label would not first, we don't have any meeting label that would kick people out. It's the most restrictive things we would do would be things like end-to-end encryption or locking the lobby. So it wouldn't have any thing to say, okay, we never allow this person to be in. Of course, that's something I know is something that you may want to say. You want to have a FTE only label. If that gets applied to a meeting, and that will kick every non-FTE out of the meeting. So that's not a capability we have today, unfortunately, because we don't check for the meeting in meeting session. We're not looking at anything beyond who can bypass lobby. So in the future, if we have that integration with, okay, if only FTE have full access, then we kick everyone out, then that may be a more, then the scenario you described may become true, that you will have a problem if the meeting suddenly upgrades to a label that will not allow you to be sitting in here. But that's not here today. Like, this will not happen today.
Great, thank you. The next one is, why if the meeting is sensitivity label internal, like only employees, external users can join the meeting?
So that depends on what you have set in the lobby bypass setting, right? So that's I would say I would recommend using lobby bypass as the gate for the access control for the in-meeting experience. So if you want to have an internal only meeting, you would need to set the who can bypass lobby to only people in my org, so that all the external user will be sitting in the lobby. Like, when they join, they will not be able to bypass the lobby and join the meeting. We are going to we're going to associate with sensitivity label the capability of locking the lobby, basically saying whoever cannot bypass lobby, they will just get automatically denied, so that there's not going to be people sitting in the lobby and waiting for admission. That process will be gone. Like, if they cannot bypass lobby, they will never be able to join. So that's something we are going to very quickly associate with sensitivity label, hopefully sometime this year. So once you have that, it will be more like access control, right? Real access control. If you can just set people in my org, only people in my org can bypass the lobby, and otherwise, if you're not people in my org, you will never have chance to land into this meeting. So that will be your how you use meeting label to control the access.
Great. The next one is GRC is at the executive level if the policy states label for certain information that policy is enterprise and should not be changed. Can we do global top-down no control change?
I didn't get the question. Oh, I found it in the chat. Let me see. I don't quite get the question.
We can see if they'll offer some clarity and move on to the next one for now.
Okay, yeah, that would be appreciated.
Cool. The next one is, can we do real-time detection for e-discovery digital investigations and evidence lockdown? That may be a better question for one of my e-discovery colleagues who answer. I don't know the answer. Sorry. Okay, no problem. The next one we have is, can a sensitivity label applied to the meeting prevent Copilot activation only for the presenter?
Apply to the meeting and prevent Copilot activation. Can prevent. Are we saying to only other than the presenter, nobody else can activate Copilot? If I understand the question correctly. So today we do have a meeting option allow Copilot. I believe it's applied to everyone in the meeting regardless of role. So you can set that that meeting option to be always allow using Copilot, or allow Copilot only during the meeting, or off being no one can use Copilot. So that is something we are definitely going to associate with sensitivity label, so that you can say that for a highly confidential label, you set Copilot to be off, for example, then I believe that would be no one can use Copilot for a meeting. And when your Copilot is off, essentially we are also not going to record and transcribe the meeting. Because once you have recording and transcription, of course, people can still use Copilot or M365 chat to summarize those content. So when you set the Copilot to be off, we actually just make sure there's no things like recording and transcription, so that people can use Copilot post the meeting. I don't think we can do that by, okay, I allow this user to use Copilot, but not that user to use Copilot will be applied to all the participants in the meeting.
Great. The next one is, what will happen to a person who does not have permissions for a given sensitivity label, and such a label will be imposed on the meeting because someone adds a file secured with that sensitivity label?
So I believe this is similar to a question that was asked previously. If you're the organizer, we'll never apply a label that's not available to you. So even if the file has that label and that label has a higher priority, if you're not published with that label, we will not apply that label to your meeting. And if you're a participant in the meeting today, there's not going to be much impact to you if we apply a label that you technically don't have you don't have access according to that label, because in Teams we don't really look at what who have access to file or who have access to this email part of the label. You know, in Teams, we only look at, okay, are you allowed to bypass the lobby and things like, we only look at the Teams meeting part of the definition of the label. So there's effectively no big impact if you are not going to get kicked out of the meeting, for example, if this is an FTE only label and you are not a FTE in this meeting. That is not something we will have today. It may become something that may happen in the future, but we definitely will not kick people out from the meeting because of labels.
Great. And then the last question we've got is, we have labels for PHI, and unapproved users have access to read those files. If someone shared a PHI file during a meeting and another attendee does not have PHI access, would the organizer get notified, or could that attendee still see the document?
I think today, if you share a file, in, let's say you share the files link in the meeting chat, and and some of those participants don't have access, I believe there's already a UX today saying not all the people have access to this file. Would organizer get notified? Would attendees still see the document? The attendee will still see the document, but if you share it in the meeting chat, whoever doesn't have access click on the file, they would not be able to get in, right? They will see their access is denied, like they don't have permission to access the file once they click on the file. So we're not going to expose that file to anyone who doesn't have permission, even though they're sitting in the same meeting. So on that front, it's safe for those type of those files. Will the organizer get notified? I don't think today we notify the organizer. If this triggers stable inheritance, the organizer will definitely get notified. But if this is just someone shared a file to a meeting where someone else in the meeting doesn't have access, I don't think this event itself will notify the organizer. But if this triggers label inheritance, saying the meeting, if the meeting has a lower sensitivity, let's say the meeting is public and your file is highly confidential, that will definitely you can configure for that to send a notification for the organizer.
Great. That seems to be all the questions we've got. So with that, I'd like to thank you, Yibing and Yilin, for being our guests and for sharing the great information with our community. Also, thank you to the Q&A team who helped us with answering the questions and providing the resourceful information. To all the listeners still on the line, if you're someone who wishes to aid in the protection of the world from cyber threats and desire to have a say in shaping our strategies, blueprints, and recommendations, then we invite you to become part of our security community. Together, we can make a global impact. So join us at aka.ms/securitycommunity. This is also where you'll be notified about the upcoming webinars, events, and other announcements. For those of you who may have additional questions on the topic we just covered or other product-related questions, please feel free to raise them on our Microsoft Tech Community discussion space at aka.ms/Purview community. Thank you all for being part of our community and for joining us on these webinars. We hope to see you next time. Goodbye.